Hello, streamers. We will need to use the microphone for your questions for the streamers. So that's just a kindness towards those not here if you'll do your question on the microphone. So this is time for you to think about what you want to talk about with the Dharma. How's your Dharma karma? Yeah, Steve.
All right, you said karma.
How's your karma? How's your Dharma karma, Steve?
Okay, so, look at this.
We got to do this for the streamers.
We're a brand new center.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure I don't have a completely false and cooked up idea of karma right now, because it's been going through my head a lot. So here we go. I'm here to be Dharma checked.
Yeah, right.
So thinking of quote unquote bad karma, I've kind of come to see it like, throwing a bad boomerang, and eventually it comes back and it smacks you in the face, right? But you said something in an interview that you and I had, our last interview, that's been sitting with me a lot for like the last month, that to kind of simplify my interpretation of what you said, when misfortune happens to you, it's of course a result of karma, something done in a past life. It was destined to happen, but once it does happen, provided you react to it skillfully, it kind of neutralizes that bad karma, right? The boomerang was thrown, it comes back and hits you in the face, and as long as you don't react to it by throwing another bad boomerang, it kind of neutralizes some karma that was meant to be, that was going to come back and get you eventually, right? And the reason I'm thinking about that frequently, it's that if I'm looking at that correctly, it kind of gives a whole new purpose and meaning to misfortune in a way that could be looked at as a blessing. That, it's like, here it is. The boomerang hit me in the face. It was going to happen eventually. Sit with it, reflect on it. Don't throw another boomerang in reaction. And you can almost see this as a blessing. It's like, okay, good. I'm glad I'm at a place that I can, taking smacked in the face and not create more karma for myself. But I want to see if I'm interpreting this in, layman Steve Eberlein term in a way that is more or less directionally correct dharmically.
Yeah, more or less. Here's a couple. There's so many tricks to karma that kind of, it seems we avoid talking about it up here. But I decided tonight to kind of open the door. Let's see. It's really just action and result, action and result. The actions are with body, speech, and mind. There's a word you used when you were describing destined. There's no destined. You said destined to happen. It's not destiny. Destiny has this flavor of you can't escape it, or
or an external accountant.
Yeah, like some kind of external accountant, like no powerless over. But basically, it's just. I always think of what Geshe Zopa said. We all have this thing where we go sometimes. Why is this happening to me? I'm innocent. Yeah, I can hear his voice. I am innocent. Why does this bad thing happen to me? I've never done anything. And the teachings on karma help you out of that unrealistic view. Like things just happen. Or no meaning to them, like just kind of a chaotic theory, like, as HIT happens. We don't function that way. It's not even a belief. It's like The Buddha looked close enough to see how karma works. He doesn't create the law. He just sees that's how it happens. Suffering leads to suffering. Kindness leads to kindness. Now there's a couple of ditches to fall in. Because most of us have some kind of Judeo-Christian background, even if your parents were not practicing. This is a Judeo-Christian informed culture in the U.S. It's the majority culture. We're all kind of informed by it. We can get caught in this reward and punishment thing. And karma's nothing about reward and punishment. Not one stitch. The way that it gets explained, if you plant carrot seed, you will get carrot. But there's also surrounding circumstances like watering it, fertilizing it, the sun coming on it, and all of those make it very complex. So that's the thing about why it's not predestined to be a carrot. Just because the seed is there, there's many other factors that come into it, the surrounding circumstances. So, but basically, yeah, it's the boomerang comes back and hits you in the head. The other thing we get confused about is, well, this guy over here, he's rich, and he looks like he gets everything he wants, and he does all kinds of harmful acts. So what's the deal with him? Is he outside of karma? Or a 4-month-old baby dies, what could they have done in 4 months that was so bad to cause their death? Well, that analysis lacks the Buddhist worldview, which is beginningless and endless time. Karma doesn't ripen immediately. It might, because of all these contributing factors. It might or it might not ripen, the teachings say, for 100 years. You may be experiencing karma now that the seeds were planted in the mind stream, not by you, Steve, because you weren't Steve then. We're just dressed up like this for this lifetime. But that mind stream carries it forward in a most subtle, non-material way. And then these contributing factors occur, and it ripens or not. There are also ways to what's called purify negative karma by studying Dharma, doing good works, like you said, meeting the difficulties with a mind that doesn't contribute to it and carry it on, like the no revenge mind. Revenge is a perfect example. You can see, you hit me, I'm going to hit you harder, and then you're going to get your brother, and we're all going to have a fight, and then it's the neighborhood, and then it's a clan, then it's a war. And that multiplies the suffering. But if you hit me, and I can do what Gandhi did, or I can do what Martin Luther King, or I can do who was following Gandhi, or I can do what the Buddha did, or what the Dalai Lama does. He doesn't call for a war against China. He doesn't even call for a boycott. A boycott was proposed on behalf of Tibet, and he said, no, that will hurt the common people. I do not want to hurt them. So he goes around, he doesn't not do anything. He goes around and does a ton of diplomacy around the world. Can we bring pressure? Can you get them to talk with us? Like that. But he's very careful not to engage in any more harm around that. And some people are quite angry with him about that. Some more political movement types, So that's what I could say right now. Did you get it, or is there more question? I'm really happy to hear you're thinking about it, because it's important.
No, I think I get it.
Okay.
I get as much as I'm able to at this moment.
Yeah, so good enough for now.
Good.
All right, good question. Yeah, thoughts about karma cause me to take care with my body, speech, and mind. If my worst ones are all around speech, I think. I don't think I run around smacking people around, but around speech. And then I'll have the thought, wow, I do not want that to happen to me, what I just did, like gossiping about someone. Boy, if you've ever accidentally come into a room and people were gossiping about you, that is so painful, even if they were not saying anything very bad. So, it causes you to take care, because you're setting it up for that pattern to be in your mind and be nurtured. It's what do we nurture in our minds? What do we nurture with our habits of speech? What do we nurture with our habits of body? So it causes us to practice ethics. And without it, practicing of ethics, we're really not going to go anywhere, because we create drama and trauma in our lives. So take having an affair, or take misusing alcohol. Creates so much trauma and drama. You can't possibly sit and have a calm mind and begin to become aware and have loving kindness. You're just, you're in fights and arguments and la with everyone. So it's that kind of cooling things down.
Just one more thing for clarification. And regarding karma, be it good or bad, my understanding is you reap karma that you yourself have sown, either in this life or in past lives, not the general karma of existence, or am I mistaken in that?
Well, that's interesting, because when I asked Venerable Chidren about that, she said, here was her example. There is kind of a general karma, like a whole group suffers from a tsunami, okay? So the group, in a way, has that karma somehow to suffer from a tsunami. But if you look at all the individuals in the tsunami, they have their individual experience of it. Some of them are killed immediately. Some turn and save a bunch of people. Some aren't harmed at all. Some just get a broken leg. Some lose all their property. Some don't. So it's quite interesting. And we do have a group karma, like we're here in the U.S. We have the karma to have the current administration. We have the karma to have environmental degradation. This is all karmic stuff too. But each of us will experience that in our own way.
And react to it in a unique way.
And we what?
And react to it.
Yeah. And there are ways, I said, of purifying karma. There's some very direct ones. The most common one in this lineage, and all the Tibetan lineages, is the Vajrasattva practice. The very white, pure, the deity that represents purity, that you learn the mantra and you do it every day, and you, who just gave that empowerment? Oh, it was at Maya Tripa. They just had an empowerment, and then you do this mantra every day to kind of purify what you did during the day. But what actually purifies, said the teachers will say, it's not magic. Like picture, a being of light and pour it through. That's a lovely thing to do. But it's the deep regret in your mind. Regret, not guilt. Regret. I wish I had not done that. And I resolved not to do it again. So the regret and the resolve are the purification. So you can do those even without knowing Vajrasattva. And it so reminds me of 12-step work, of AA or 12-step work, addiction recovery work, making amends, regret, resolve, that kind of thing. All you're doing in that is strengthening your mind against the pattern that caused the suffering. That's the purification. It's not magic. It's pretty common sense when you come down to it. Yeah. Things to add? Subtract? Divide?
One thing on the notion of collective karma as you were saying, it's not sort of this, you joined, you were a Johnny-come-lately and you joined the group, and then just by virtue of being part of the group, then you get this thing. It's not defined, it doesn't arise in that way. Particularly it doesn't arise in relationship to sort of, well, those people must have done something, of course, because I don't like them, but they must have done something, so this thing that happened to all of them.
Yeah, they were
so
bad.
They were bad. The themness of it is not really the point. And what you were pointing out about the example, when you really look at how things actually ripen in something that you kind of in a glossy way say, well, all of them suffered from this. It's not
because it was their karma.
Yeah, it was their karma.
It's not like that.
It's different.
Yeah.
I found it helpful to step back from trying to get too detailed a map of it, and just appreciate that sense of the consequentialness of everything, that everything is of consequence. And then that's a little bit not like trying to figure out, well, this little thing, it must do what I need to. It's kind of like a cooking book. If I get a cake, I need to have had flour and eggs sometime in the past, and then if I had flour and eggs sometime in the past, I will have a cake now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of to try to like get it so detailed that I think that leads away from an appreciation of the kind of the dynamic quality of it, which is and it would certainly that kind of one for one explanation also doesn't allow for that, the richness that you were talking about, and all the causes and conditions that go along with any particular situation. That you can, for example, have either pride or deep regret for something that you did, and that one of them reinforces a tendency and reinforces certain kinds of consequences, and the other one may actually dissolve a lot of that. So, and I think that's actually a much more important thing than to think of but even just the simple thought, well, I must have thrown a boomerang because I just got clobbered. That's not so bad. It's not so bad. If we just think, okay, that will get me to appreciate that things are consequential.
Yeah.
All my activity of body, speech, and mind is consequential.
Yeah, but the complexity is that you might throw a boomerang and get hit in the head with a tree 20 years later. And so that's what Bill's pointing out. We can't map it. They say only the Buddha knows. And the Buddha can look at people. When we get a fully awakened mind, which is our capacity, but it's all mucked up right now, you will be able to help someone by seeing, oh, this was how this came about. Karma is definite. That's one of the main teachings about it. It will ripen unless it is somehow attenuated by purification practices. And it does create the habit, if you're, and you can see this, someone who's angry, and it's not interrupted and they don't see it, it just grows, in this way and leads to a lot of suffering, or someone who's craving. And there's another aspect to karma. Oh, it's the habit, but there's also, as Bill said, it doesn't make sense much to map it out like, oh, my mom used to hit me when I was little, so I must have hit little kids when I was a parent. That's not a bad thought. That's kind of the boomerang level. So then I'm careful, But it's not quite, it's kind of simplifying. But on the other hand, it has kind of a truth to it, because one of the things about karma in the classic teachings is what you are experiencing is similar to what you did. So we also need to look at our wonderful conditions. We're here in a Dharma center and attracted to the Dharma and practicing it, and many of you for a long, long time. That's from the habit of doing it in the mind stream. Otherwise, if the mind stream wasn't attracted, like so many people come here for one time and they go, that's nice, bye. And that's okay. I mean, not everybody's going to be a Buddhist, but you know, or people seeing wonderful things and then go off and say, oh, I just want to, you know, play cards and smoke cigarettes for the rest of my life. And they do that, you know, and our job is to engender compassion towards them for that, but not above them, but because they are our dearest brother, sister, friend, and we care. But these patterns do get going, and there is similarity, you know. I'm going to take a risk here, but it was so helpful and so powerful in my life. Venerable Children told this story that a woman on a retreat went to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who's really a very high Lama in the Gelug tradition, still alive, still teaching constantly. And if you're ever around him, you have no doubt that this guy is like living in some very pure kind of mind, because he just, it creates it around him. And this woman went to him and said, Rinpoche, my parents abused me very badly when I was a child, and I'm just so upset about it. And he said, you should ask them for forgiveness. And she thought the interpreter didn't interpret it right. And she repeated, and he said, yeah, you should ask your parents for forgiveness. And he left her with that like a koan. And I had the same koan in my life. So I just thought, what the hey? You know, why would you have to do that? And or even be suggestive of it. And the way out of it, or the sense to it, the worldview, the Buddhist worldview sense to it was, as your parents do that, you get the opportunity not to, so you purify. They just took on the karma of doing that. So if you really open this up to an interdependent kind of emptiness thing, but mostly interdependent, that goes on and on and on, at the sacrifice to themselves in a way, not intentionally, but the outcome is you get the chance to be done with that. They have now just set themselves on the path to have more suffering, unless they also get a chance sometime to step out of it, and they may. That was and still is a really interesting thing to me to think about, that Lama Zopa said that. And it really opened up a bunch of things for me about how I am in the world and who I judge and who I call victim and who I call oppressor. It was like, interesting. Because all those beings are suffering, victim and oppressor. We often kind of take the victim side very quickly and easily, the so-called victim. And the oppressor's bad and the victim's good. That's a pretty simplistic thing, which is not really so accurate when you begin opening up all of this, how karma functions. So it doesn't have to make sense right now, but just something to think about. And it really helped me spring open some stuff where I was quite stuck, you know, in my being the victim, you know. So I found it quite helpful. Difficult, but helpful. Yeah.
It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
In our Western culture, we often judge things as being good or bad.
Yeah.
And I think there's a simplistic view of karma that kind of arose with the New Age, which says that if I get a flat tire, then it's a bad, I'm getting a boomerang. I did something wrong in the past to get this bad thing to happen to me. However, thinking about this over the past years, something really bad happened to me. Pretty serious stuff. And there were people who said, oh, you must have this bad thing in your life because you're burning karma from a past life. However, I see it quite differently. I see it as a huge blessing. Because without it, I never would have come to the understanding, I would have never would have if I'd just been normal life. So I've thought about this, and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm wondering if we also have to rid ourselves. I'm just curious about this because there's also another example, a little sidebar here, that when the earthquake happened in LA a long time ago, long ago, someone came up to someone that I know and said, oh, God is so good to us and we didn't have the karma to be there. And my friend's reaction was, well, like, we're all damned that we're in the, in the earthquake.
The rest of us, yeah.
And I sometimes think that the whole deal of karma must be very, very deep, and that we can't just say that because I have a headache or I twisted my leg badly the day of the empowerment. I didn't really see that as the result of something that I'd done before. It was the result because I was in a hurry and I planted my foot wrong. I mean, that it doesn't really, things don't have to be the result of something that you did bad in the past. It could have been the result of something that I did good in the past that allowed me to have a different perspective. Do you see what I'm talking about? I mean, I think sometimes that in our culture we see things as bad and good.
Yes.
When actually something that might seem very, very bad, and other people can say, oh, you're burning karma from a past life, actually isn't that at all. Right. It's actually like a big blessing.
Yes.
Okay, so
I got that.
Did I get the point across?
Yeah, I think the way that I hear, if I get what you're saying, I got breast cancer in 2006, and that was a big surprise, and it was scary. And, because it always, cancer brings that death thing with it. And that was plenty scary. And it turned out to be an incredible impetus towards practice, towards more kindness, towards less pride, towards all kinds of things. And a lot of people who get a really dangerous illness express that this was a blessing. It's still karmic to me because the idea in Buddhist philosophy, and you don't have to buy this, I'm just explaining it, there is no life outside of karma right now for us beings, because we're still stuck in the samsaric mind stream where we suffer. So partly we suffer because we have constant reactions, actions. The Buddha has stepped outside. Do we have one of those Wheel of Life tankas? There's the tanka with the Wheel of Life, and the Buddha is standing outside of it, but all the 6 realms, including the human realm, are within it. So it's not like it's hopeless or anything, and whether you call it karma or not karma, it's just action, result, action, result. I really like what Bill said, and it's so important, it's almost kind of dumb to do the thing of, oh, you know, you weren't in the earthquake, so God loved you, or you were in the earthquake, so you're burning this and that off. It doesn't, we don't need to think about it that way. And that's not the purpose. The purpose of it is to simply point at reality and then say, whatever I think, say, or do has effect. It has a constant effect. Even thoughts, constant effect. And I think you're right. I try and steer away from good, bad, and talk about suffering or not suffering. Does it cause suffering, or does it lead away from suffering? Or is it neutral? There is neutral karma too. They say certain actions don't go either way, you know. So
Can suffering also be good?
Yeah. People go off to war, and people went through the Holocaust and wrote amazing books that affected others so that they could go through terribly difficult things. People go to war and are heroes and save lives and come out very kind. All these can be transformed. That's the beauty. Buddhism points to that. I mean, most everyone, I would say, generally you don't come in here and do all this work because you were happy. Suffering brings us to wisdom, right? Suffering brings us to wisdom. If nothing else, to some care and compassion for ourselves and others. So suffering is, what's that thing called? Rinpoche said to that one guy, you haven't suffered enough. You know, and what he was saying was, you haven't suffered enough to really see what you need to do next. Suffering brings us to a lot of compassion. It can turn into not suffering. Nothing is solid. Suffering's not solid. Happiness isn't solid. Yeah, so you're right.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm still curious about this habit of mind that we have in our Western culture of judging things as good or bad, suffering or not suffering, and that if someone is suffering, then they can be led to being a hero. And I sometimes think it's much more empty than that, and maybe I'm just not being clear about this, so if somebody else wants to pick this up, but that the judgment of something being bad or good isn't so helpful.
Yeah.
And that if we can see suffering as empty,
So I'm just wondering, do you mean that suffering or not suffering is just a euphemism for good or bad? Is that what you meant?
yeah, that there's this judgment about something, you're suffering or you're bad or it's negative, and there's all of that side, and then there's it's positive. And I don't actually see that the same way. I see it pretty mixed up, that someone can do something that's very meritorious and it not be actually positive karma. I guess that, and I do think it's a Western culture thing about good and bad. Is this making sense, Denny?
Yeah,
I think
we can understand what you're saying.
My friend Cynthia, thank you.
We do understand what you're saying. Thank you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, I actually had a sort of a quick follow-up to that. Where was I even sitting? It kind of sounds like what you're getting at is there a way for us right now, with our mind streams as they are, is it even possible for me to know good karma or bad karma when I see it? I mean, from my perspective, I'm just that deluded that there's no way for me to know what events, what actions and consequences that either I engage in or that I experience as results. Is there a way for me to know if those are good or bad?
Well, now here's where we get to this piece. When I get to that, we get to this piece that the Buddhists end up at about eternalism and nihilism. So we can go, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but we can go so far that it's all empty. So there's no suffering, there's no not suffering. So what I do doesn't matter. That's why we have to go back to, because in our deluded state, I don't realize emptiness. I live in the world of eternalism. Everything looks pretty solid. There's Matthew, there's Zopa, there's a microphone. You know, I can meditate and get calm and quiet and get a sense of openness and maybe flashes sometimes, but I'm not a 10th level bodhisattva, so I'm not ready to, say everything's anything. I still have to work on ethics, the 10 destructive actions, body, speech, and mind. And that's kind of on the side of eternalism, as in pretty solid. We work our way towards the ultimate, but we can get stuck in this nihilistic thing too. And we usually get stuck there sort of philosophically, not so much experientially.
Yeah, I agree.
If I yell at someone or I get yelled at, it hurts. I can go straight to my experience. I don't have to go into philosophy, or or I get a disease. I can be scared. It hurts. Yes, it can transform. It transformed for me through practice and through my teachers. That's how it transformed. I didn't transform it by myself. I'm not that skilled yet. Does that kind of touch where you?
Yeah, I think so. It just kind of sounds like you kind of, I'm sort of in this, good, bad, less suffering, more suffering. And it kind of sounds like you're just kind of asking us to drop our worry about one or the other, just kind of do the best we can to.
Well, the good, bad is stuck in the relative ditch. It's all solid, it's good, it's bad, it's suffering, it's not suffering. But the nihilist ditch it's all empty. And that's a misunderstanding of emptiness. And I'm not saying anyone here is saying that, but it's considered one of the more dangerous kind of ditches to get in. Thinking we understand emptiness way before we understand it, and therefore it's like thinking I can walk through that wall and smashing up against it, Is that making sense? So people are getting, there's some things to be careful about this.
It kind of sounds like instead of the good or bad being the two ditches, it sounds like you're saying it's good, bad, or neither are the ditches.
Yeah, good, bad, or anything goes. Because everything is nothing. So, yeah. The nihilism is that it's too far over into nothing exists without having the foundation. That's why Buddhism talks about bringing the ultimate and relative together. We don't have to bring them together. They are together. They're united. And we can get way over on one side and way over on the other, but the metaphor is always the bird flies with two wings. Compassion, that's the relative side, and the wisdom, needs two wings. You don't see a one-winged bird.
And we're just kind of,
we just work back and forth,
I don't know. I almost try to I kind of feel like what I do is, you're saying it's together. So in order to create that, we almost kind of create the ditches ourselves, because we tear the bird apart and, say, okay, that part's bad, that part's good, that part's left wing, that part's right wing. Yeah. We just forget that it's like a potter. That's another metaphor they use, using enough water so the clay doesn't get so dry it cracks. That would be more like nihilism, or pouring on so much water it's just smushy mushy, lack of wisdom. What's that called? Idiot compassion. Oh, I like that.
Compassion with no, you know, we run around helping, 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 you know, which is not very helpful to a lot of people. They see you coming and they run away. So what do you have to add, or Dora? Yeah, Dora's got something.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, I think from the Buddhist point of view and the terminology that we use, that suffering is what we all don't want. So even though, I mean, that's kind of the definition. Everybody wants happiness. Nobody wants suffering. That's the Dalai Lama's, will say that over and over and over. And that really is kind of what the relative situation boils down to. So that doesn't mean you couldn't learn, like you said, learn things from suffering. But if we have a choice, I mean, suffering, the definition of it is it's stuff we don't want. It's what we don't want. Now, to me, that's very different from the, and I think the bad and good is, those words are much trickier. And so I like the, I don't know, positive and negative. And then the definition of those is not that this cup is good or this cup is bad. It's when the cup is used to give me a drink that I want and it brings me happiness, it's positive. When it has scalding water in it and it's dumped on somebody and burns them, it brings suffering, so that was negative. So, you know, if this was an action instead of a cup, that's how positive and negative are defined. So it could be that I make the cool drink for somebody, and for the one person it brings happiness, but the other person wanted something hot, and I gave them something cold, and it brought suffering or something in between. So we don't always know the skillful thing that will lead to happiness for others, but when we see, we do the best we can. If our actions are causing apparent suffering, that is a sign we should go by. I mean, that is how we can think, okay, I'd like to avoid that. And if we see that actions that we are doing are creating apparent happiness, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. So that's
I think Bill wanted
I
to
just have a
add in.
comment,
Yeah.
and that's that the 16th Karmapa in the 1970s once gave a teaching on this, and he said the hand of compassion is not always gentle.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So I hear us putting things in two, it's either happiness or not happiness, it's either suffering or happiness, and there is a whole bunch of gray area in the middle that is much more complex. And just because we think something is suffering, the cool drink may actually have helped us in some way. But also, he gave the example of a parent jerking the hand of a child, causing the child great pain, swatting them on the butt to keep them from great harm.
Yeah.
sure.
So the hand of compassion is not always gentle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
So it's more complex, I think.
It's very complex. But what are our guideposts, and you know, what are we aiming at? I mean, I think that's what we want to. That's kind of the only thing we can keep clear, I think. So, kind of have to simplify things to do that.
So last word, Bill, because we're
On this
close on time.
kind of the issue of complexity, and also your question about can you really figure this out? You can't really figure this out. And I think that we tend, in those of us who have an intellectual bent, can tend towards getting everything so divided up and complicated that we sort of prove that it's all beyond understanding in some way. And so therefore, what? Therefore something, but it just kind of, then that just falls back to whatever our style is and our predilection. Then we go for that.
Yeah.
Because I just figured out you can't figure anything out. So, well, I think I'll just drink some gin now.
Yeah.
That's
why we have
or
the
I'll
ethics.
take monk's vows. I mean, whatever it is that we'll just. But I think it's really important not to make it so complicated.
Yeah.
To admit
the
that
experience.
it is beyond the ability to nail down, but keep it very simple. And then you do your best, and it's good to have guidance from the teachings. It's good to have guidance from teachers. It's good to ponder the things the 16th Karmapa said and all the others. But along the way, you just have to do your best. And in that, simplicity and humility, I think, is really essential.
Yeah, it comes down to the first thing the Buddha said, do no harm. And we don't have to sit around thinking, harm? What's harm? We know it. We know it in our skin and our bones.
Sometimes we can think that, but
Yeah.
we just do our best.
Yeah, you just go ahead and you know a lot about the territory of harm from our experience.
We do our best.
Good discussion. Thanks, everyone. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you. Have a great week. Hope to see you Wednesday night. Chenrezig.